So recently, I was reading through this dry little legal document that almost nobody outside the aviation and law nerd world pays attention to, and it just punched me in the chest. It was one more official body, years after the fact, coming out and saying, in careful lawyer language, yes. This was a missile. This was deliberate. And this country bears responsibility for what happened to that flight. And you forget, because the news cycle moved on, that we are talking about a single commercial flight full of regular people whose families are still living inside that moment. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, middle of July 2014. Summer trips, kids on vacation, people heading home, people going to work. Nothing exotic, just a plane on the schedule board, another aluminum tube crossing a continent. You have this mental picture of Schiphol that day. Morning light through that big glass, the usual airport soundtrack, rolling suitcases, final boarding calls, coffee machines hissing, 298 people making all the tiny choices you make before a long flight. Do I grab a snack now or on the plane? Do I text one more time? Do I buy the magazine or just watch movies? Some of them are in that gate area because of a coin flip. Different route was too expensive, different day did not work, this one had a better connection. A couple changes seats so they can sit together. Parents put their kids by the window. Stuff you only notice in hindsight when you look at the seating chart in a report and realize every little dot is a whole universe. They board. They shove bags into overhead bins. They sit down. They do that thing where you judge who is next to you and decide whether the trip is going to be loud or quiet. The crew does their routine. Close the door, back away from the gate, roll out, line up on the runway. The pilots push the throttles forward, and the whole thing becomes one object, nose up, wheels up, climbing into the same sky that has carried billions of people without incident. From the cockpit side, it is as standard as it gets. You are leaving Western Europe, heading southeast. You climb to cruise. The computers handle most of it. You are talking to controllers, checking weather, checking fuel, looking at the display that shows other traffic. The route crosses Ukraine, because at that time that was still a normal thing for airlines to do. War on the ground, yes, but those are soldiers and artillery. The big assumption was that nobody's going to touch an airliner 11 kilometers up. Down on the ground, that assumption had already started to crack. Eastern Ukraine was a mess. Separatist forces holding ground. Ukrainian forces pushing back, Russian support behind the scenes. Anti-aircraft guns, shoulder-launched missiles, and, most important for this story, bigger systems capable of reaching way up into the high flight levels. There is a point in this flight where the two worlds get within range of each other. Up high, the passengers are settling in. Drinks, headphones, maybe the first movie is rolling. Down below, a radar operator and a missile crew are looking at blips on their screen in the middle of a war zone where anything in the sky that is not yours is a potential threat. You have to imagine that moment in the launcher cabin. It is hot. It smells like metal, old sweat, fuel. Someone has been told there are military aircraft in the area. There is pressure to show you can hit something. There is bad information moving down a chain of command that is half official army and half militia. A plane appears on the radar, high up, fast. The question that should have been asked 10 more times is, are we completely sure what that is? Instead, what happens, according to years of reconstruction, is that a buck surface-to-air missile system is driven from across the border into separatist-held territory, set up in a field, pointed at that sky, and fired. If you have ever seen test footage of those missiles, they are terrifying. They leave the launcher like an angry spear with a trail of fire behind it, climbing fast. The warhead is designed to detonate near the target, not inside it. It sprays metal fragments outward in a cone, shredding whatever is in that zone. Up in the cockpit, there is no long dogfight. There is no radio call where the pilots get to say what they are seeing. Every reconstruction we have says the missile approached from the front left, detonated just ahead and above the cockpit, and that was it. The crew never had a chance to send a mayday. The front of the aircraft was ripped apart in an instant. On the ground, in those fields near the village of Hrebov, people look up and they see pieces of an airplane falling out of a summer sky. Wreckage rains down over a huge area. A section of fuselage here, an engine there, burning debris, personal belongings. There are stories of passports landing in gardens, seats embedded in the earth, paper still fluttering. You have villagers, separatist fighters, Ukrainian emergency workers all converging on this horror show with no idea what they are walking into. They know a plane has gone down. Some of them assume at first that it is a Ukrainian military jet, because that is what they have been seeing shot down in that war. Then they get close enough to see the logo on a piece of fuselage, the first bodies, the clothes, the suitcases, the toys, and everything shifts. The first images the rest of the world sees are shaky videos and phone pictures. A field with a section of orange and blue tail, smoke still drifting, bodies on the ground, covered with bits of fabric or not covered at all. People walking around in camouflage with rifles slung over their shoulders, taking pictures, talking into phones. It looks chaotic because it is. There is no controlled perimeter, no neat line of investigators and vests. It is a crash site in the middle of an active conflict. Newsrooms start getting these images, and at first there is confusion even on the basic question, which plane is this? People remember that another Malaysia Airlines flight, MH17, had vanished earlier that same year. This one is different. This one is right there on camera, in pieces. Flight number 17 from Amsterdam, every seat filled. There is no mystery about whether anyone survived. There is no search grid in the ocean. All 298 lives ended in the same square of sky. From that moment on, you have two stories running in parallel. One is grief. Families refreshing news sites, calling hotlines, staring at television anchors who are trying to talk through incomplete information. The other is responsibility. Who did this? How? Why? Getting answers out of that landscape is a nightmare. The crash site is in territory controlled by separatists who do not answer to the Ukrainian government. Armed men move through the rows of wreckage. There are reports of debris and possessions being picked up, moved, even looted. Bodies lie in the heat for days before they are collected and put into refrigerated train cars. International investigators and monitors show up and have to negotiate access every day like it is some weird hostage exchange. They can walk the site for a few hours, then get ordered back. But even in that chaos, the physics does not lie. When the Dutch Safety Board and the Joint Investigation Team finally get enough of the wreckage to lay it out and study it properly, patterns start to emerge. In some sections of the fuselage, especially around the cockpit, there are hundreds of small, neat holes punched from the outside in. They are not ragged like shrapnel from a bomb in the baggage hold. They are tight, almost regular, like something hit that metal skin with incredible speed and then passed through. Investigators find fragments of metal embedded in the frames and panels, little pieces with a distinctive shape that matches the payload from a particular model of missile. They take those fragments, those patterns, run them against simulations, manufacturer data, field tests. Everything points to a surface-to-air missile from the Book family, launched from the ground, detonating right where witnesses saw a plume in the sky. At the same time, all the cables and intelligence networks start pulling tapes. Radar logs, satellite imagery, phone intercepts. Remember, this is not happening in the middle of nowhere. Eastern Ukraine in 2014 is one of the most heavily watched pieces of land on Earth. Governments are listening, watching, and tracking everything that moves because there is a war going on. What the Joint Investigation Team does over months and years is ridiculous in its detail. They take phone calls between separatist commanders and their contacts. They geolocate those calls based on cell phone towers. They match photos and videos of a buck launcher moving on a low-loader truck with the backgrounds in those clips, building by building, tree line by tree line, to reconstruct its route. They track it from over the Russian border into rebel territory to a field near Pervomaisky and then back again with one missile missing. That is the piece that turned this from a mystery into a crime in the legal sense. A passenger aircraft did not just happen to blow up while a war was going on. A specific weapon system, owned by a specific state, was driven into a battle zone, fired, and driven back, and that weapon brought that plane down. The Russian government from day one denied that. They floated other theories. Maybe the Ukrainian Air Force shot it down. Maybe there was a bomb on board. Maybe the missile data was forged. You had all these alternative stories popping up in media friendly to Moscow, some of them contradicting each other. They throw enough mud that people who are already skeptical start to say, well, who knows? Everybody lies in war. The investigators do what they always do in that situation. They put every theory on the table and test it against the evidence. If you say it was an air-to-air missile, does that match the fragment shapes and impact pattern? If you say it was a bomb, do the recorded sounds on the cockpit voice recorder make sense? If you say the boot came from the Ukrainian side, does that fit the satellite track and the phone calls about moving the launcher? Over time, one line of explanation keeps staying upright when the others fall apart. A Buck missile of the 9M38 series launched from a field in separatist-held eastern Ukraine from an installation brought in from across the Russian border, shot down MH17. Then there is the footage that you almost cannot watch without feeling your stomach drop. The intercepted calls and videos of rebels on the ground realizing what they have done. They walk around the wreckage, voice recordings pick up men saying, in Russian, that the plane is civilian, that there are bodies, that there are children. You can hear the shock and panic under the bravado. That is the moment where the guy who fired, or the guy who ordered the fire, understands that whatever they thought they were doing, they have just put nearly 300 civilians into the ground. After that, the story branches in two directions. One branch goes into international law. The other goes into grief counseling. The legal one is slow but relentless. The Dutch lead the criminal investigation because the flight left Amsterdam and a large number of the victims were Dutch citizens. They partner with Australia, Belgium, Malaysia, and Ukraine. They build a case not just against the weapon, but against the people who moved it, commanded it, used it. In November 2022, a court in The Hague convicts 3 men with links to Russian-backed separatists of their role in downing MH17 and murdering everyone on board, and sentences them to life in prison in absentia. They do not get their hands on the actual operators in the field. Those guys are ghosts behind code names and uniforms with no insignia, but they put names on the chain, people who requested the missile system, people who arranged the transport, people who bragged on the phone about what they just shot down before realizing it was a passenger jet. On top of that, you have the larger question. Was this just a case of rogue separatists with a borrowed toy, or was there state-level responsibility? That is where all these boring new documents come in that triggered my little spiral when I read them. The Joint Investigation Team, in a 2023 update, says there are strong indications that the decision to supply that Buk launcher to the separatists came from the top of the Russian state. They stop short of saying they can charge the president personally in a Dutch court, because heads of state have immunity in certain legal frameworks, but they lay out the chain of calls, approvals, and support that points upward. Then, in different arenas, other bodies weigh in. You have the Dutch and Australians taking Russia to the International Civil Aviation Organization Council, basically the referee for international air travel, and that body concludes in 2025 that Russia is responsible under aviation rules for the downing of the flight. You have the Netherlands filing a case against Russia at the European Court of Human Rights, saying, in essence, that the state violated the right to life of the people on that plane. Every time one of these things happens, it barely makes a ripple compared to whatever other insanity is in the news that week. But if you are one of the families, or you are somebody who cares about what we allow in the sky, each one is another brick in a wall of reality. This was not bad luck. It was an unlawful act with a chain of human decisions behind it. On the grief side, there is no chain of command to cleanly map. You have parents who had 3 children on that flight, gone in one instant. You have one guy who lost his brother, his sister-in-law, his nephew, and niece, 4 names on the passenger list from the same family. You have whole rows in the cabin that were taken up by a school group. You have scientists heading to a conference on AIDS research, wiped out mid-career. It is like fate took a random thick marker and dragged it across a map of the human world, connecting all these lives that had nothing to do with Eastern Ukraine. A lot of those relatives have been doing this absolutely brutal thing for a decade now. They go to memorials, they sit in courtrooms and listen to translators read out details about missile trajectories and shrapnel patterns. They give quotes to journalists when another judgment comes down. They keep pictures of their loved ones on mantles, and sometimes they go quiet for months because there is nothing left to say that does not reopen the wound. There was this one comment from a family member that stuck with me. They said that every new legal finding is a second kind of crash. The first one is the physical loss. The second is the realization of how many opportunities there were for this not to happen. If someone had closed that airspace earlier, if someone higher up had said, we are not giving advanced surface-to-air missiles to irregular forces in a civilian flight corridor, if someone in that launcher cabin had asked for one more piece of confirmation before pushing the button. That is what makes these new discoveries so haunting. It is not like someone found a black box in the swamp 10 years later. It is that we keep unearthing decisions. A phone call that shows someone knew what system was being moved where. A radar printout that proves the missile came from exactly that field and not another. A legal judgment that finally uses the word responsible instead of ducking behind neutral phrases. At the same time, aviation quietly changed because of this. There were already rules about not flying over active conflict zones, but they were kind of patchwork. Some airlines would route around a war area, others would not. After MH17, that casual approach became unacceptable. Airlines, regulators, intelligence agencies started talking to each other more. Route planners began drawing big, invisible red boxes over places where long-range weapons were in play, even if the shooting was only on the ground. You see it now when new conflicts flare. Suddenly you get these weird dogleg routes on your flight tracker app. Planes going north around one region, south around another. A trip that used to be a straight line on the globe now has a kink because someone decided we are not flying civilians over that ring of fire. There is something so modern and insane about the MH17 story. A civilian flight gets vaporized by a cutting-edge missile in the middle of a proxy war, and the evidence trail is built out of intercepted cell phone calls, social media posts, satellite images, and tiny fragments of metal. International courts and councils spend years putting language around it, while families live inside a 10-second event they did not see. If you strip it down, it is one more reminder that the sky is not really separate from the ground. You can be 11 kilometers up, in a pressurized cabin with a plastic cup in your hand and a movie in your face, and you are still inside someone else's argument over power and territory. What stuck with me reading that latest judgment was how small the original mistake could have been. Maybe one officer misread a radar return. Maybe one memo about civilian traffic did not get passed down. Maybe someone on a radio call said target without specifying what they saw. That is all it takes when a weapon built to bring down a fighter jet is under the control of people in a chaotic chain of command. So, yeah, the headline version is, New MH17 Discovery Shocks the World, but the reality is quieter and heavier. The world is not shocked anymore. The families were shocked in 2014. The rest of us had our moment and moved on. What these new findings do is lock the door behind the truth. They make it harder for anyone in the future to say, nobody knows what really happened, and use that to excuse themselves. Somewhere out there, over that same part of the world, planes are still flying. Different airline codes, different passengers, those flights exist in a sky that has a scar in it, even if you cannot see it out the window. And buried in the fine print of legal decisions and safety bulletins is the story of MH17, written in a language that basically says this: we saw what happened, we traced it, we named it, and in the middle of all the politics and denial, there is one thing that cannot be argued away. 298 people got on a plane that day expecting to land, and they never did, because somebody on the ground turned a weapon meant for war onto a line of blips that included them. That knowledge does not bring anybody back. It does not fix the hole in a parent's life. But it is the only thing we can do in the aftermath of something like that is not just mourning. You tell the story straight. You dig until you cannot dig anymore. You pin the responsibility to the board so it cannot quietly fall off and get swept under a rug.